creating a model on Heroforge and making it ready to import into Blender. In order to prepare for this, you need to have three things: Heroforge, which will go via heroforge.com, an AssetStudio, which is available by GitHub, and Blender, which is available via blender.org. I'm hopeful that when you're watching this video, you will see links for Heroforge, AssetStudio, and Blender down below in the rubric. And you might even see a link up there to a playlist where we talk about how to set up Talespire so that you have the right mods to be able to use custom miniatures, as well as how do you actually use Blender to paint and sculpt your images. In this video though, we're going to focus on taking a model from Heroforge all the way from logging into Heroforge through to posing and transforming it in Blender, and then using it directly in Talespire. We're not going to spend any time talking about painting or custom sculpting or rigging of your model. Those are topics for another video. But we are going to talk about the things you need to do to get a fully colored image into your Talespire. The end-to-end process is relatively straightforward. It's kind of 8-ish steps, maybe slightly more. So the first thing you do is you go to heroforge.com, create an account and log in, make your model, pay money to Heroforge so that they will then make your model for you, and you download it as a virtual tabletop Unity file. We're going to use AssetStudio GUI to unpack the wavefront files as well as the appropriate texture maps, and we'll show you how to do that in a minute. And then we're going to copy some files around, use Blender to then set the model up appropriately and export the file, and then edit a materials file in order to append a particular thing to it so that the colors get done. It's a relatively convoluted process, and in fairness, it took me a fair amount of time to work this out with a great deal of help from the wonderful modders in the Talespire modding community, Demon Gund, Hollow Fox, and Lord Ashes amongst them, many others as well. And a big thank you to Fitz and King of Demons for helping me get through this process. Big props. Thanks, lads. Now, so we're going to go through this step by step. It is not the most riveting of processes at the best of times, so you're going to see probably some smash cuts as JR moves us through this process at some speed. However, here we go. Firstly, when you go to heroforge.com, you see this, and it is basically a large character screen. Now, normally, I have an account, so I am logged in. You may not have this, so in this case, you will need to create an account and log in. Really very straightforward process. I have paid Heroforge with an annual subscription. It's quite a lot of money. It's 150 bucks. You do not need to do that unless you are doing a large number of models. You get about 50 or so models for free. So it's actually a good deal if you're doing that. But if you're not doing that, don't worry about it, because you can buy them on a per model basis. Nevertheless, we are going to create ourselves a hero. So here is our brand new hero called Hero. And the first thing we'll do is we'll save it. So you've got Hero saved. We're going to make ourselves a Rabbit Folk Barbarian. Sound good? So let's give our Barbarian some fancy clothes. I think we'll remove the hat because I don't think he needs a hat. And then we're going to give him a, let's say, a Barbarian's Battle Axe. Sounds reasonable. Double-handed Face Smasher. Lovely, look at that. Now, over time, you will want to remove the base, but in this particular case, I'm going to give him a mount. He's got a pony and a battle axe, and I'm going to pose our dearest warrior with an epic pose. We'll get the body in there. That sounds good. We're going to go for an advance. We'll give it a bit of twist. Change the grip position a bit. Going to move the arm back, am I? All kinds of things you can do in this game. Really quite interesting. So let's do it this way, actually. That sounds good because it looks like he's riding someone down. So then we'll go back to that advance piece. So then now his shoulder twist. There we go. The axe is now above his head. Perfect. So you can see, look at that. Our violent rabbit. Pretty awesome. Looks like he's about, so what do they call them? Harangon barbarians? Harangon? Ha today, con tomorrow. Right, let's paint him a bit. You can see, set some colors, use the theme, get our pony a little bit of a color. It doesn't really matter what you do here. It's up to you. You spend hours in here. Like, there's a lot of customization that can be done inside Heroforge. You can play around with things to your heart's content, and you probably should, because it's a lot easier to paint in Heroforge, I tell you, than it is to paint anywhere else. So if you were to try and then do this later on in Blender, Don't get me wrong, it's definitely doable and you can do a hell of a lot. It's a powerful tool, but it is so much easier to do it here, I'm telling you. Our Heroforge Barbarian done. Now, fortunately for us, I have what I made earlier here, who we'll call Buggs Barbarian. And the reason why is because it takes a period of time for us to go from our model to an actual baked file, because it takes time on the Heroforge side to generate the files necessary in a way that they can then be downloaded. And the way you do that, you go to buy, and then obviously you can buy a real one if you want. You can buy a premium plastic one. You can buy a color plastic where it comes pre-painted, which is pretty rad. You can buy it in bronze if you wish. You can buy it in STL download, which is going to be for 3D printing yourself. And you can buy it in 3D tabletop download. And this is the one you want. You want the 3D tabletop download. See, it says here the STL, not suitable for in-game or virtual use, whereas this is suitable for in-game or virtual use. So you then click this, and you will then download it for 1 credit or $7.99 US. Now, I've already done this, so I'm not going to do it again. But what will happen is you will get an email. It says 15 minutes, but actually it takes a little bit longer sometimes. The other day it took me about half an hour or so. So I tend to just do a bunch of models and then kick them all off. But they will then appear in your digital downloads. And so I will then have this file here, which is our Buggs Barbarian. As we download Buggs, it appears in the directory in my downloads. It's actually a zip file. And so I would like to extract this zip file just to see what's in it. So I'm just going to do it there and then so you can see what's in this file. If you look in this directory, you see that there is very, very simply a single file, a Unity 3D single file, which unfortunately is not a file that can be realistically used or modified. It's designed just to be grabbed, right? And it's a bundle that's designed so that you can then use it inside Unity. That's it. They haven't really done anything to obfuscate this in any particular way. It's not like it's designed to be a bad thing. It's just, this is the format you get this file in, and that's it. So, how do you unpack this? Well, this is where the first of our tools comes into play. If you recall, in our presentation, we have Heroforge, which we've just been to, and now AssetStudio. AssetStudio is available via GitHub, and the link should be below. I will run it for you so you can see it. We have a AssetStudio GUI. Now, this is a very, very simple and straightforward GUI. And there's very little you actually have to do here. Basically, you have to make sure you set the export options for the texture to PNG or PNG. And you have to run menu, export all assets, and put it in a directory that makes sense. So let's do that. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to load a file. We're going to load a file from our downloads and here, and you can see there's our Buggs Barbarian Unity file. And if you look through this file, you'll see there's actually just a simple scene hierarchy. There's just a single scene here. And the set of assets stored in this file is this model of the diffuse texture. This is the normal texture, which is laid over the top of it. And this is the occluded texture that sits on top of it. And then metals and anything that emits light, gives off light. For example, here you can see this is the top of the axe. It is very, very, very possible to use these things in a more sophisticated manner. For the moment, though, we are not going to be particularly stressed about it because our goal is to extract these files into a usable format that we can then modify in Blender. Looking back at our process, we finished number 4, we're on number 5. Use AssetStudio GUI to unpack the wavefront OBJ file as well as the texture maps. Make sure we set our things and then we're going to get these files. So how are we going to do this? So let's go back to AssetStudio. So the first thing we do, export options, and we make sure that's set to PNG, which it is. The next thing we are going to do is export all assets. That's it. And then it says, where can I export all assets to, please? You actually need to create a directory that contains the nonsense. So then what you actually have is the correctly unpacked files with 3 directories: Animator, Mesh, and Texture 2D. These different files inside Animator are the actual files that you won't need in the animation. Inside Mesh is an object file, and inside Texture 2D are texture maps. So what we're going to need to do, right, is we're going to grab these files. Now, there are a couple of ways of doing this. I personally like the idea of doing these things in situ now. I used to do them separately, but it's easier to do them in situ now. So I'll just create a directory here that I'm going to call Talespire, TS Mini if you like. So then into that TS Mini directory, right, I'm going to grab that diffuse texture, and I'm grabbing this object file. And then I'm going to rename this object file, and I'm going to call it Buggs. I'm going to rename this diffuse texture file, and I'm going to call it Buggs diffuse, in fact. Now, I'm just doing this because later on, it will make my life a little easier. Because actually what I'm also going to do is create a directory here called Buggs itself. Because this is the directory we are going to export our file to. Now, it doesn't quite make sense to you, I completely agree. It's a little bit confusing, but just to quickly recap what we've done. We have gone from our downloads, where we've found this file. We've got this Unity 3D file. We have used AssetStudio to export all assets into this Buggs Barbarian directory. That has created 3 directories. I have then created a directory called TS Mini underneath there, and then created another directory called Buggs, which is where I'm going to put my stuff, my final working stuff. I've also copied the texture file into this Buggs directory, and I've copied the object file here. There's more we can do, and then we will do more, but right now, this is it. Having now done that, I then need the next of my tools. Thank you very much, AssetStudio. We're good now. My next tool is Blender. So Blender starts up like this, and Blender comes from blender.org. It's very, very easy to install Blender because you go to blender.org and you create download Blender. It is entirely free, open source, and it is amazing that a tool that is as complex and powerful as Blender is actually completely 100% free. Things to be aware of. Because I said powerful and complex, Blender is also incredibly intimidating. So we are going to do the absolute bare minimum we need to make this model work in Talespire. There is so much more you can do. Any of those that are interested, there will be other videos on how to do this. So keep an eye on the thing or the playlist this is in. The first thing you do in Blender is you delete this gray square. The second thing we're going to do, we're going to import the wavefront object file up there. See that? Good. So then having done that, we need to find our right directory. So let's go up here. And you see we're in the T4C Mini working. And then, so then having put this here, we're going to Buggs Barbarian. And you can see we've got all these directories here. We're going to TS Mini, and you can see there's Buggs.object here. This will load our Buggs object. And you can see a few things. Firstly, we were down here and that cube was small. And what do you see there? You see a big gray screen. That's because Buggs is huge. This is much, much bigger. But we need to fix that. A few things need to happen. The first thing you need to do is you see up here, see it says light here. You need to delete that light. So you click it, you hit the delete button, and it goes away. Once you've done that, you will then click on Buggs, and you can see now that Buggs exists in our world. Right? He's a thing, he's a person. He's got feelings. We're then going to click on this lovely little orange box here, just literally right above my head. There. Ding, 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 ding. So we click this orange box and you see a window that says transform and a bunch of other things like that. So you can see up here, we're going to use Blender to modify the location first. Then we're going to modify the rotation. Then we're going to modify the scale, as you can see here. So the first thing we want to do is make it so that we set the location to 0, 0, and then 0.07 meters. Now, normally we would just get rid of this base, and that's another thing we'll do in another video. So there'll be another video we talk about sculpting, and another video we talk about painting, where we'll cover removing bases. So if you're after that, have a look up there or look down there. Now, you can see we're floating off the ground. Well, you can't really see it because it's really, really hard to tell because of the fact that you can see this is a big fucking model, right? So instead we need to set up our rotation. Now, to be clear, the rotation is in 3 dimensions as well, X, Y, and Z. 0 stands the model up. It was set at 90, it's fallen over. The yaw will rotate this person. So basically the bum moves. No real change in pitch because you're not going up and down. Right, so you can see now we have a model that is oriented correctly. The second thing we do then is we get our scale right. Now this is a subjective thing, but in essence, let's look at our scale values here of minus 0.027, 0.27, and 0.27. And these numbers are a sensible default. They'll make it so your models work with other Talespire models and don't look particularly weird. But you can see now, all of a sudden, we've actually got a much smaller model hanging out over here. This is as far as we're going to go here. What I tend to do, because I will come back to this file later, is I will save a Blender file. Under our Buggs Barbarian directory, TS Mini, I'm going to save a bugs.blender file. And this is so that I am able to do other things later on, because invariably I will want to come back to this model and clean it up in one way or another. For the moment, though, we're not going to worry about that. Instead, what we are going to worry about is exporting our model into the right format, which is very, very straightforward. So we will just export our object file. Here you go, export the obj, and we go into our Buggs TS Mini directory. So this is inside TS Mini, this is inside the Buggs directory itself, and I'm just going to call this bugs.object. And then export the OBJ file. But you can see that it's generated two files, an MTL file and an OBJ file. And those become important because the MTL file is needed in order to be able to map the associated materials to the object. What do I mean by that? Well, I'll show you. This Buggs directory, you'll see here is the MTL, here is Buggs.object, here's Buggs diffuse PNG. We're going to edit this MTL file, and we do that with an open with notepad, and you can see here Buggs Barbarian blend, but then here is the object, here's the default object, here's some interesting magic numbers, I don't really know what they are, and then it ends with an illumination statement, and then finally a blank line. And I will, per my instructions, add this line, map KD, and then my texture map. So I go back to here, I'm going to say map underscore KD, capital K, important, Buggs diffuse.png. Save that, close. So now in this Buggs directory, I have my three things. I have my Buggs MTL, my Buggs object, and my Buggs diffuse. Now, earlier on, we looked up a custom directory inside Talespire that was going to give us where our mini location was. And you can see it's here for me, right at the top over there. It is program files, Steam apps, common, Talespire. Probably Talespire custom data will exist, and if it doesn't, you should create it with a capital T, capital S, capital C, capital D. And then finally, minis should exist. Once that's there, you will have all of these lovely things. It's all good. So now I am going to take our Buggs directory from here, and I am going to copy it to this side. So you can see now there is Buggs here. There's an old one here called Buggs1. I'm just going to leave that there for the moment because obviously I've tested this, but this is called Buggs, is our production Buggs instance. What's left? That's it. That's all that's left. Now the rubber hits the proverbial road, or the shit hits the proverbial fan. Let's see. Now this will not work because we need one more mod. We need the custom mini mod. So if you look down here, the custom mini plugin. This is the way of doing this stuff manually. So you come here, you download the custom mini plugin, you download with dependencies. It's now there, ready to go, and it will basically set up stat messaging, sets up radio UI, sets up a few other bits and pieces. But nevertheless, we now have our custom mini plugin installed. We will start modded. There's an important little step there. Don't forget the custom mini plugin needs to be enabled. So you can see it's now opened, and you'll know this is working because you can now see up here Lord Ash's custom mini plugin version has been created. Previously, it wasn't there. If you watched any of our other videos, now you can see it's there. And then we will begin, and then we will go into our FNFO. Don't know why. Should it be FANFO? Doesn't matter. As you can see here, some things have been created. Look, it's still our thing from previously. It's our Spelljammer board and everything else. But the question on all of our lips is, what about Buggs? Right. So, unlike with the more advanced model we've just been talking about, we are going to have to use a proxy model. It actually matters what proxy model you pick. If you pick a one-legged or two-legged model, actually the balancing becomes harder. If you need to pick a four-legged model, it matters, honestly, trust me. That's a cow. And then you can actually hit Control M, And Control M pulls the custom mini plugin up straight and says, make me a. When I type in Buggs, because that is the name of the directory and the name of the object file I've created. And you can see now I have a beautiful Buggs. Ready to rock and roll, ready to fight a giant Tarrasque in order to assume the throne of Barbaria. There we go, have a look at that. So these very simple steps, and don't get me wrong, it is convoluted, it is complicated, but it is not complex. If I can do this, you can do this. It is a series of straightforward steps. In review, go to heroforge.com, create an account and log in. Make your model. Spend a long time doing it. You will, I know. I did too. I still do. Pay some money to Heroforge in order to have them sort of bake your model, and make sure you get the virtual tabletop file, not the STL. Use the AssetStudio GUI to grab that Unity 3D sort of package they give you and unpack it into its component contents. You will then run Blender to set your model up. In order to use Blender to modify the model and set its scale and move it around and transform it correctly, you've got a few things to do. One, you have to import the object file into an empty new Blender scene. So obviously when you open Blender, it will probably be a blank scene. Maybe there'll be a gray box in the middle. Delete that. Then hit import and navigate to the default.obj file that came with the thing you unpacked a minute ago. Then set the location values correctly. Leave a little bit of space off the floor so that the model that Talespire gives you, the little base that Talespire gives you, that your feet don't sink into the base. Then set your rotation values correctly so you are not lying on the floor, but instead are flat, and that you actually rotate yourself so that you're pointing in the direction you should be when your model appears. Finally, pick a scale that makes sense for your model. 2.7%, 0.027, seems to be the correct number. Once all this is done, you will need to export the model from Blender as a wavefront object file. Additionally, once you've got that object file there, you will need to copy the texture map from that set of directories and edit the materials file that has been created by Blender to map your texture map onto your model. That's it. Complicated, but straightforward. That's all you need to do. I hope you have a great deal of fun with this. I hope you enjoy it as much as I have. Thank you very much to the folks over at Talespire for building this amazing product. Thank you very much to the folks at Heroforge for building an amazing product. And there is going to be a Heroforge to Talespire bridge coming soon. So this video may become dated, but the next video where we talk about finding model files on the internet and then using those files and painting them in Blender, that is still something that I think is going to have a long-term value, both in terms of fun, but also in terms of being able to mod Talespire. That's where I'm going to leave you for now. Thanks very much. Take care.